Hello,
Hey, Sean.
how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Good.
Oh, also, FYI, Sean, I did not ask Joel to mention the city bike thing, by the way, during the last meeting. Just throwing that out there. I feel like every time he goes up, he says I've told him something, but I have not. Just so you
Um,
know.
Noted. I'll figure out a good way to call him out one of these
I
days.
do. It's hard for me to keep a straight face whenever he goes off on one of those things because we're in front of everyone, but I'm like, oh God.
I know, sometimes I look back like I'm trying to take notes and I look back on meetings and I was like, Sean, your camera off if you're gonna, if you feel your eyes about to roll, turn the
Yeah.
camera off. Hi, Glenn.
Hey, Glenn.
You had a fresh haircut, Glenn?
You're on mute.
We can't hear you, but I'm
Okay. There I am. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hi, everyone.
How you doing?
hello. Musa, you get to ring us out with the last committee meeting of the calendar year.
Fun.
Should we do noisemakers at the end or something?
Good
Fireworks?
afternoon, or I should say good evening, everyone.
Good
Hello,
evening.
Gail.
Good evening.
Happy winter solstice, everyone.
Yes, same to you guys.
So I saw the email. So you were in touch with that lady from
Yeah,
Methodist and all that's taken
yeah.
care
She's been great. Yeah. I mean, she almost said, I could do every single day. And it's like,
of.
good to
Oh,
know. But I
thank
think
you,
she's going
but
to
no.
focus on health and wellness day, and I think maternal health care. She'll contribute to that too. But we have everybody lined up for the diabetes prevention.
Well, that's a really important one.
Yeah, we've got 2 days of that. So panel both days.
I just hope we get a good turnout of people who can you benefit from these things?
Sure. I hope so too. I'm not terribly panicked though, given the time of day and time of year and all of that. The fact that we'll record them and we'll keep distributing them out as the year goes on, I think will be an ongoing
You're not
resource.
terribly panicked, which means that at other times I've never seen you panic.
You have no idea. Always. My baseline is panic every day.
Okay.
I Irish it down.
You handle it well, Sean.
Thank you. We have our friends from Transportation Bureau at NYPD are showing up in a timely fashion. And I know, Musa, you want to, we'll give it at least a couple of minutes to our actual starting time, and then you might want to, we'll keep an eye on who pops on to see if you want to wait even beyond that.
Yeah, I'd like to get us started as close to the official time as possible, but
I hear that. And give me about a 30-second warning when you're going to make the beginning official so I can get the recording on.
got it. Hey, Nina.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, team.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Evening.
Yeah, whenever you're ready, well, we could start with some introduction, just to let everyone know the staff here at the transportation.
Sure. I'll give you the notice of when we'll get going. I'm just gonna wait 2 minutes. We'll start at 6:31 p.m.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
How was the holiday party? Did anyone here go?
Yeah, at the 70 precinct, it was a packed room of eager children, and Santa looked suspiciously like Detective Nuzzy.
Ah,
But it was great, and Inspector Separano was there to say farewell, even though he isn't going that far away, and Inspector Mackey was there to introduce himself. Like, what a great way to start your first community council meeting as a CO, to be at a Christmas party with a bunch of totally adorable children. It was all good.
my first time missing it in years. I mean, but I called out sick. I should have probably stayed home sick Tuesday, and I just called out sick for the rest of the week. So
Hopefully you're feeling better.
So
So should I
feeling
go ahead and
better.
hit
not to gift anyone with my germs.
Yeah.
Should I hit the record
So
button?
let's get this started.
Recording, and I will now mute myself.
We set one guideline for tonight in the spirit of Christmas. No, nothing disparaging about Hess trucks.
Sure. Got it. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining.
All right.
This is the last meeting of the year for this committee, but apparently for all committees. Transportation Committee of Community Board 14. I am as you can probably tell, the co-chair of the Transportation Committee, along with my co-chair Joel Siegel. We have a few speakers who are going to join us tonight. The first is we're going to hear a report on truck traffic rules and enforcement from the NYPD Transportation Bureau. A quick note before we kind of get into the presentation and the discussion, just so folks know, this conversation I think is going to focus at a high level on truck enforcement rules, policies, procedures, operations, and obviously we'll probably end up talking about certain constraints. If you're looking for like a very intersection specific or site specific feedback that you want to turn over, you can obviously reach out to the district office or your local precinct, or file whatever appropriate report needs to be filed, just so everyone knows. All right, and with that, we will hand it over to the NYPD Transportation Bureau.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Inspector Thomas Alps with the Transportation Bureau. I'm newly assigned. I've been here since October 5th. So I'm new to this role, but I hope to help you and answer all your questions in regards to truck enforcement and truck collisions. Hello, everyone. I'm Captain Elvis Padilla from Transportation Bureau. Just like the inspector, I'm new here and looking forward to working with everyone and answering any questions.
Good evening, I'm Lieutenant Murphy Bautista, Operation Coordinator, Transportation Bureau.
Captain Lap Lee from Traffic Enforcement District.
So you guys, you want us to go with a presentation and how we're seeing things here at the Transportation Bureau? I'll give you some data.
Thank you.
So when you look at citywide vehicle collisions year to date, I'm talking about all types of vehicles. We're at 91,613 across the city versus 99,212 last year. So we're down 7,599 collisions. That's citywide. When you extract trucks and buses out of that number, there's been 13,793 truck bus collisions across the city. That was versus 15,775 last year. So we've seen a significant reduction, about 2,000. When you break that out and you look at Brooklyn South, where you're currently located, there's been 2,134 truck or bus collisions year to date in Brooklyn South. Versus last year, it was 2,226. That's about 100 less from last year, truck collisions in the borough of Brooklyn South, our patrol borough of Brooklyn South. When you break it down even further and you focus strictly on the 7-0 precinct, there's been 169 truck bus collisions year to date versus 179 last year. So there's been 10 less. When you look at Brooklyn South Patrol Borough overall, they're the third highest for truck bus collisions. Bronx is the first. Brooklyn North comes in second. They're both averaging about 2,400 truck bus collisions per year. Brooklyn South comes in third with 2,100, approximately 2,100 truck bus collisions. When you look at enforcement and you go across the whole city, citywide, you can see that NYPD focuses primarily in Brooklyn South, your borough or your patrol borough. So year to date, there's been 4,110 summonses written to trucks in Manhattan South. There's been 2,549 summonses written in Manhattan North. There's been 3,029 summonses written in Patrol Borough Bronx. There's been 3,177 summonses written in Brooklyn North. There's been 2,931 summonses written in Queens South. 1,842 in Queens North, and 547 written in Staten Island. And then when we move to Brooklyn South, your patrol borough, we've written 5,704. So you could see we're heavily focused in Brooklyn South. And then when you even dissect that more, in Brooklyn South, of the 5,744 summonses we've written year to date towards a truck or a bus, 1,282 has been written in the 7-6 precinct. In the 7-0, we've written 479, which is the second or the third highest command in Brooklyn South where we wrote truck summonses. So what I'm saying, even though the patrol borough of Brooklyn South is third highest, you're getting the most attention, the patrol borough itself, as far as truck bus enforcement. You'll ask, why is that? We're heavily focused on the BQE. If you're unaware, or maybe you are aware, the state DOT has installed what they call a weight in motion sensor in the BQE. If you're familiar with that, more or less, it's a weight. When trucks go over this weight sensor, it measures
Hi,
the
going
weight
to
of
the
the
third
truck.
floor.
And if the weight of the truck is over the allowed limit, it snaps a photo of the truck, and the owner operator gets a summons in the mail, which is quite expensive. For your knowledge, that weight and motion sensor is only eastbound on a BQE. It's located on the elevated BQE underneath Pearl Street. In 2024, there will be another weight and motion sensor installed on the westbound lanes going towards Staten Island. I'm not familiar what the location it's in. It's going to be installed, but it will be installed. Our primary concern right now, NYPD, and our primary focus is the BQE and that area. So one of our concerns is that trucks now are getting the summonses. We had a period of time before we started issuing summonses that they were getting alerts that the enforcement period was going to take place at a certain date. So they had like a 3-month grace period. Hey, listen, get yourself in order because these summons are going to be automatically mailed to you. Don't be shocked. So what our concern and in communication with DOT is that truckers now have learned the hard way through summonses that perhaps they may get off on an exit, go through Brooklyn local streets, and get back on a BQE and avoid the motion sensor or the weight sensor. So we're in communication with DOT, and we're strategically analyzing that, as well as with the local precincts to enforce truck routes, to make sure they're not being violated, whether they're local or through routes. And we primarily, as a bureau, we have 3 units that does truck enforcement. So our 3 units are highway units, which you normally would see the highway officers on the highway. But they also have what they call as a motor carrier unit that is a sub-unit within the highway unit. There's 7 officers assigned to this unit. 5 of the 7 also do buses. These guys are federally certified from the FMCA, I think it's called Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. They go through a course and then they're certified, and it allows them to do this type of enforcement. So in a nutshell, any officer can pull over a truck at any time. It doesn't have to observe a violation to stop that truck. We can stop them and do an inspection. But these officers are federally trained. So they get the training, they do the enforcement. Like I said, they're primarily along the BQE, specifically, exit 26 eastbound, they're heavy at. And I'll talk about other units that are also doing this type of work, but I'm just going to stick with the primary unit. Their primary objective is weight enforcement. They do other type of enforcement, whether it's brakes, safety stickers, weight, equipment violations. And I can give you the breakdowns of the numbers of what the top 10 violations are. Hubs, that's like leaking hubs, brakes, DOT inspection, tires, axle fasteners, inspections, air brakes, load securement, again, weight, U-bolts. That's like the typical over length, logbooks, hazmat, tires, off truck route, no bill of lading, things of that nature. Those are the top 10 summonses. But getting back to that highway unit, the motor carrier unit, Like I said, they're trained. And then when they do these type of inspections, they have to enter into a database. It used to be called, it's a federal database. It used to be called Aspen. Now it's called Safety Net or something like that, or Safe Travel or something like that. They changed its name, but it allows anybody else nationwide that is certified in this type of area, like Texas could see what we inspected and what violations we found on this date, and vice versa. We can see what they inspected on maybe just similar type of trucks. So that's how we communicate federally, the law enforcement partners. So we also have 2 other units that are involved in truck inspection enforcement. We have a motor carrier unit within our citywide traffic task force. They consist of 4 officers. They're certified as well. The certification is like a multi-day, multi-day training certification. But CTTF, that's what we call them, CTTF motor carrier unit. They focus mainly on safety equipment. They're not as advanced, I would say, as the motor carrier unit, and they don't use that Aspen system I was telling you about. And then we have an element of truck enforcement within our traffic enforcement division. Luckily, he could speak to that unit if you have any details on where specifically they position themselves on a daily basis. They're all these units are around the BQE. So I believe TED is closely near the tunnel going into Manhattan. They're primarily our only unit that's monitoring westbound BQE. But you can just see by like how I laid it out, you guys are primarily the focus. Now the 7.0 is an interior command, as you know. It has some through streets that we're looking at. I can talk to the CO or the XO, who's usually in charge of traffic, to alert them to step up observations for off truck route. Local is if you're making a local delivery. Through streets is if you're making one of your points are within the borough. That's how that law works. When you look at fatalities involving trucks, our truck fatalities for the year are 47 for the year, and that's versus 54 last year. So we're down 13% in truck plus fatalities. When you look at the investigations, 10 of the 47 involved a truck error. The others did not have a truck error. Of the truck fatalities, 3 were the truck was off route. 29, they were on the route. 8 involved a bicyclist getting struck. 5 involved basically a moped being struck. 17 were pedestrians. 8 were motorcycles, like your regular standard motorcycles as opposed to a moped. And 9 were occupants in a vehicle. So we do see a reduction in that. So I hope I gave you a pretty good understanding of where we're focused, the threat, and I guess we'll open it up to anything, any questions you may have.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. Some of that information is really useful, and I'm glad people get the opportunity to hear it. We will, if anyone has questions, just raise your virtual hand, and then I'll walk through a virtual discussion. Why don't we, let me just start with Sean, and then after we'll go to Liz.
Thanks a lot. And I, thanks for all of that information. I also want to quickly add in a thanks to Lieutenant Bautista and Captain Badia for being so responsive when I reached out and shared with them a letter that this board signed on with a whole bunch of other boards over a year ago. I appreciate, you know, the 7-0 is very responsive, and we work in great partnership with them. Their traffic sergeant, Ari Dubitsky, is excellent and very data-driven and always helpful. And Captain Smallwood is the XO there. I think you heard me say the CO is brand new, joined us last week, but we feel like we're in good hands with the oversight at Brooklyn South. I think that when you talk about something you said jumped out at me when you were talking about the top 10 enforcement reasons. You said the over length truck, and there's a lot of talk in this community and complaints in this community about the 53 footers. And there's a general understanding that they shouldn't be anywhere. They shouldn't be on any of our truck routes, that they're not supposed to be within the city. So I'm wondering if that's true, and if you can speak to what seems to be a proliferation of 53-foot, 18-wheelers in our districts trying to make turns where they don't fit. And then I'll yield to the board members. Thanks.
So I don't have that in front of me. Lovely, would you happen to have that regulation in front of you? I don't know if we necessarily have that, but let me just see for length, right? Over length by our highway unit, year to date, we've written 15. I'm not seeing any by our traffic enforcement division. And I'm not seeing any by our counterterrorism, citywide traffic task force. So in New York City, overall length may not be over 55 feet. 55 feet's a number, bumper to bumper. There are certain accommodations made for commercial trucks to pass through the city limits with a 53-foot trailer. Oftentimes, the length of a trailer is denoted on the forward portion of the trailer. You'll see the numerals on the front of it. So that's the limitations of the size of the trailers. I don't know.
What was that exception you said? They can kind of go through the city to get somewhere else? Is that my understanding?
No, so we were talking the differences with routes. Is that what you're talking about? So a local route, you must have a local destination, or you come from a local destination. A through route is your destination must start or end within the borough that you're in. That's how you define whether someone's off a through route or off a local route. But when we talk about length of trucks, the overall length in New York State, no truck or tractor trailer combination may be over 65 feet. But New York City, it's 55 feet, bumper to bumper.
Okay. Liz, you're next.
Yeah, so this is actually kind of partially related to that. I have the information from DOT up right now. It's www.nyc.gov/html/dot/motorist/sizewt.shtml. Just for record here, there's not a chat, so I can't just drop that in. But yeah, it does say that trucks can be on truck routes and interstates if they are under 55 feet total in length. I think a lot of people talk about 53s casually just because you see that number 53, there's no 2-foot cab, right? So just to give some clarity there. And looking at this page again, it also says that trucks with 53-foot trailers may only travel on portions of I-95, I-695, I-295, and I-495. So we shouldn't be seeing them anywhere on local streets, but we see them all the time. And there's like a ton of them on Caton especially, which is a super narrow street in our district. Very dangerous. It's right by the parade grounds. There's lots of families trying to cross. But like one thing I just want to, I'm curious about is if, I think that's like the number one thing people talk about with trucks is the length. It just makes it so dangerous. There are so many trucks. I live right by Caton and Coney Island Avenues intersection. There's always trucks turning there, and there are always these illegally over 55-foot trucks, and they often take the leading pedestrian interval, which is supposed to be reserved for people walking and people biking because bikes follow the pedestrian signal. And that's supposed to be a safe time to like start going across with your kid or with yourself, or if you're slow, just so you get visibility before cars come. And there are just trucks turning there like all the time. And I think that one of the issues that people really feel is that these large trucks just make it very difficult to walk around. And they kind of move in ways that aren't very expected. So I guess two questions I kind of had is one, how much of that is being handled with the weight-based permits? Like, do we know if there's any data yet about how those weight ticketing, if that catches all 53-foot trucks? I assume it doesn't because they are allowed on some interstates, though I think the BQE isn't one of them. But I don't drive, so I'm not totally up on my numbers offhand. But just like, is that catching that, or is there something else that needs to be done? Because, I think you're all working really hard to try to do enforcement of this and make sure that our streets are safer and have better truck things. But there's just so many trucks out there that, would it be better to have like an automated solution that's checking length at some key points throughout the city or something to make sure that these trucks aren't, getting, blocking intersections when families are trying to cross with a stroller, or someone who's elderly and slower is getting caught by their fast turn. That's like the number one thing I hear about walking around in our district is just how dangerous the trucks and their turns are, and just wanted to get a better understanding of the scope of how that problem is being handled, and if there's any more details, and if there is a path forward to get it better.
So you talked about the weight in motion, and the weight, that's a weight only automated enforcement system. And it's only, like I said, in one direction on the BQE. Now that's a total separate issue from length. Something maybe DOT would have been great to have on this conversation, because it could be something, how can we leverage technology to automatically address these type of issues. So we are having discussions with DOT and the state in regards to bridge strikes. And we're having discussions, how can we limit them and reduce them, and through the use of technology. So perhaps this would be a conversation with DOT. How can we do something similar with the weight in motion to address the rates, to also do length of trucks? So in other words, the automatic sensors would be able to measure the truck electronically and then measure you and then send you a summons, something of that nature. It's a great idea. I'll definitely mention it to DOT as a suggestion. But as far as length, it's pretty much our officers having to enforce that. And if you want to get command specific, again, we're really focusing on that BQE. The 7.0 is on an interior command. We're doing significant enforcement. I'm sure the command is helping us as well. I don't have it broken. There was 479 truck-related summonses issued in that command. I don't know how many was issued by the command personnel themselves. But, I can have that conversation with the XO and the traffic safety sergeants to focus their efforts on trucks off route. You may see a lot of trucks, but they might have a local delivery. You may see a lot of trucks, they might be on a through route, and they might have to be within the borough. I'm just saying, unless, that's something we have. The only way you can verify that is by stopping them and getting their delivery records. So you can't, we can't just assume that they're just traveling through unlawfully. So I'll have that conversation with the 7.0 XO, and then I'll bring that suggestion. I think that was a good suggestion to use technology to address these issues. But I understand your concern about trucks.
I just want to clarify, if they are over 55 feet total, then you don't really have to stop them to know that they shouldn't be there, because unless they're on those interstates, it sounds like they're not supposed to be there at all, right? Or am I getting that wrong somehow?
No, yeah, if they're over 55, they're unlawful in the city. So if you could bring that to our attention, if we're not seeing it, you could certainly, if you have that communication with the XO, or you have that ability to communicate directly with the traffic sergeant in the 7.0, let's bring that to his attention. I mean, you're saying that with certainty? Do we know that for certain? How do we know that these trucks are over? I'm just throwing it out there so I can be.
Yes, yes.
I can say it because, like, if I walk on Caton Avenue, you can see very clearly that a trailer is marked 53 feet. I've actually been out there with a 55-foot wrong ruler once,
Okay.
holding it with a friend and watching the truck go by. And we've noticed, that it passes me before it passes. It's still on his side. So, like, I think it's pretty. You can find this out, but I take the point that maybe somehow it's mislabeled or something, but it does seem like at the very least, stopping trucks that are labeled as being that long and verifying it is not super complex, but of course I think an automated solution would be better, and I really appreciate your clarifying all of these answers on it.
Thank you, Liz.
So what you're saying is you would like to see a focus in the Seminole for trucks that are over length.
I think with confirmation of the ordinance, we can work with Captain Smallwood and make this request for more focus on the oversized enforcement. And would appreciate your backup on that as well.
Yeah.
For resources and support.
Sure.
I think one of the consistent themes you'll probably be hearing tonight is concern around some of these really large trucks. So any support you can provide in that regard, that would be great. I'm just going to keep us moving along because we have a few hands and we have limited time we have a few other presenters. I'm going to call on Steve and then Joel. Steve Cohen. Unless he's not going to take the opportunity, then we're moving on to Joel. Joel, go ahead.
Wait, I'm here.
Okay, Steven, you're on.
Wait, just kidding.
Thanks. So I guess my question is, or multi-part question, how primed are NYPD traffic cops or just NYPD vehicles in general to spot, as they're out on patrol, to spot overlong trucks? Like, what sort of guidance are they given? And related to that, I guess, one thing that I've always been concerned about is seeing overlong trucks on narrow streets, like say, streets like Beverly Road, where it's only one lane of traffic in each direction, and the parking spots along the road are usually taken. So, what logistically, if an officer spots an overlong truck driving down one of those routes during a busy time, how do you even like pull a truck over, without like causing major traffic backups? Like, is it something that is difficult to do, and how do you work around that? I'm curious about that.
Right. So Steve, you made some valid points that I forgot to add. So, and I'll just be frank with you, the average police officer on patrol is not focused on this issue. Your traffic safety officers that do traffic enforcement in a precinct, this would not be a primary focus of theirs as well, unless the community itself was voicing this as their overwhelming concern. There's other areas where your traffic officer, and I'm talking about command officers, that would be focusing on. They'll be focusing on speeds, DWIs, failure to yield to a pedestrian, stop sign, disobey a traffic control device. Trucks, primarily, in my experience, a traffic safety officer at a command level would not be focusing on this, nor would he be trained on how to do this. That's why it's really, truck enforcement is limited to those three entities that I spoke of in the beginning: our highway officers, our traffic enforcement division, truck enforcement unit, and our motor carrier unit within CTTF, or Citywide Traffic Task Force. But you brought up a good point, and I talked to the officers who are assigned to do this type of work, focusing on trucks. They're limited in their areas where they can do truck inspections due to it's congested. They need large areas, so they can only do it at certain points. So they consistently go to the same points, to be honest with you. Stopping a truck could cause all sorts of problems. on an interior command, local streets, things of that nature. So typically where they're doing it is in areas where they have that room to do it in inspections, and these inspections are detailed. You're weighing the truck, you have weights and things like that, and you're doing a full-blown inspection where you're checking all his paperwork, and it takes time to do this. And we can do it at any time, we can stop the truck at any time, but it's when it's safe and feasible to do it is where really we're constrained.
Thank you. Just want to, I'm going to give this to Joel for his question, but let me just make a note on time. I think we'll talk about this till probably 7:10, unless Sean tells me we have more time for this. But that's where I'm aiming for. So Joel, go ahead.
Just quickly, I'm a little confused on the length issue. If a truck is 50, has a cab not the cab, if the trailer is 53 feet, does that mean by definition it's larger than 55 and therefore not supposed to be on the street? Because notwithstanding the fact that it may have a destination going to in the borough or leaving the borough, is this 53-foot trailer mean it's by definition larger than 55 because the cab, is that the rule? I'm not clear on that. If anybody knows.
So the overall length from bumper to bumper is 55. That's in New York City. May not be over 55. So it can be 55.
Right. But no cab is 2 feet.
Yeah, I think the implication here seems to be that if you have a 53-foot trailer, you're probably having a cab that's more than 2 feet long, unless there's some German design I haven't seen yet. But
I wonder if the truck people even know that.
yeah, probably.
Just something that what's the legal route for 53-foot trailers in New York City? Just gonna read this to everyone. So in New York City, the interstate routes approved for 53-foot trailers in I-95 between the Bronx-Westchester County line and I-295. I-295, which connects I-95 with I-495. I-695 between I-95 and I-295. Then we got one I-495 between I-295 and the Nassau Queens County line. I-678 between I-95 and the John F. Kennedy International Airport, and I-95 between I-695 and the New Jersey State line on the upper level of the George Washington Bridge. This is the only mention on 53-foot trailers in New York City.
Well, that I hate to sound like the lawyer that I am, but that suggests, I mean, they're all highways. Those are all highways. That suggests that they don't belong on 53 foot trailers don't belong on our streets. But whatever.
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing generally is that they aren't, but based on what the team has told us so far from the Transit Bureau, is that there are limited resources and they have to make decisions around when to pursue certain trucks or when not to, and how to take on an overall approach, from my understanding. I just want to keep us moving, unless you guys want to add some more, sorry. Okay, Greg, and then we'll do Jeffrey.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for the presentation. So I'm just looking at the same page just to try to put this to bed. So I'm looking at the same page from the DOT that I think Elizabeth originally referenced. So it looks like there is a permitting procedure if you are over 53-foot trailers. And what you do is you have to have in hand a permit for both of your destinations. So basically, you have to be going to a destination within the city, and you have to have two separate permits, one to get there and then one to get back to one of the approved roadways. So I understand what's being said in terms of enforcement, that it's difficult because if you stop them, it looks like, basically it's sort of a spot check as opposed to, just sort of a absolute that if they're over 55, then therefore they should be ticketed. But I think that's my understanding, but I just wanted to know.
So that suggests that those trucks can be on our streets, the 53 trailers.
If they're properly permitted, yes.
I will note that someone has recently foiled this information and found no indivisible load requests had been filed. So these permits are not happening. Like no one's applying for them. So, maybe since they foiled it, there have been a few, but certainly not for many years. So I would not say that there's a likely chance that they are following this rule correctly.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's interesting.
Just a quick reminder that I'm in charge right now, so please raise your hands to talk. Thank you very much. I also want to take advantage as much of our time. That's directed at everyone. It's not directed at any particular person. I do want to take advantage of having the team here and being able to direct questions at them while we do, because we just have them for a couple more minutes. I'm going to move on to Jeffrey.
Hi. Yeah. Quickly, when you have been doing this sort of enforcement of, or the weights, and you talk to the truck drivers that are overweight, or when you said you have the national system where you share things in Texas, are there particular companies, outfits, et cetera, that are bypassing the weight sensor for various reasons? Do you know like why they're doing it? What can be done to get them to stop? Are they working on splitting into smaller loads? Like, do we know? Like these trucks are coming all the time. Do we know what can be done, or their relationships with the trucking companies to help them figure out how to get goods around ways that are compliant with the laws?
So we're in communication with DOT. DOT is providing us data when it comes to summons issuance of at that weight and motion center in a BQE. When it started, it was at its peak. The number of summonses issued. It has slowly dropped off. That could be a good thing. Maybe people are in compliance. We're pessimists. We want to make sure that they're not trying to avoid the sensor. So us and DOT are in communication, and we're talking, and we're like, if I was a truck, where would I get off? Let's start monitoring those areas. It's mostly in the 7-6. I want to say Atlantic and Tillery, those are the exits. We're focusing somewhere around there. I actually have it written down somewhere. So we're not certain that that's happening. We want to make sure it's not happening, and it indirectly affects the 7-0, and they start going deep into Brooklyn. But we're on high alert to make sure that we didn't cause a bigger problem by trying to solve the weight issue on the BQE. The weight issue on the BQE has to do with infrastructure. They see the trucks being heavy and destroying the infrastructure of the elevated highway. So could we cause another problem by forcing these trucks into local roads to try to escape this thing, and then cause the public to be in danger, pedestrians, bicyclists, the local community? We want to make sure that's not happening. So what we're doing is we're positioning people in Brooklyn to gauge that. We're being proactive. But they are seeing a reduction in the number of trucks going over that weight and getting a summons.
Sure. Thank you very much. So I'm just seeing the time. We are at 7:10. I am going to exercise some of my own privilege and give myself the last question, and then we'll move on to the next subject. I'd really be interested in hearing how, so let's say a big truck is in the neighborhood, any neighborhood, but obviously we're talking about ours, and it makes a turn, and this happens all the time where it's a 53 or 55-foot truck, and it makes a turn, that's way too tight, it gets stuck, it jams up the whole thing, right? The whole street. And then some police get called. Do you have a sense of like what actually happens then? Do they get a ticket? Do you take the truck off the road entirely? Like what actually happens? Or do you just kind of clear the road so the truck can get moving wherever it needs to go?
So when officers get on scene and they investigate any collision, fatal collisions are investigated by our highway units. They most certainly would write any enforcement related that could be a contributing factor to that fatality. When we talk about just your average collision, I'm saying, sideswipe a vehicle as they're going through the thing, through a local street. a good police officer would investigate that and be like, at the very least, I would believe most of your patrol precinct officers would recognize this truck is off truck route and do that summons. I can't see, and I'm just being transparent with you, I can't see your average police officer in a patrol precinct that's on patrol that responds to 53 accidents, writing anything outside that. If he didn't have a driver's license or a truck endorsement, I could see them writing that. But outside of that, they wouldn't have that experience or knowledge on how to really drill down and be like, oh, by the way, your hubs are leaking, you're overweight, you're over length. That's not something your average patrol officer on patrol that responds to accidents would be knowledgeable.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys being here and answering our questions, and I think it should give you some sense of some of the concerns in the community, which I'm hoping can be informative in your conversations elsewhere. So thank you very much. Next, I'm going to hand it over to my co-chair to take us through the next presentations and discussions. Thank you.
Just before I introduce the next guest, is the next guest here, by the way, Hanif Yazdi?
Actually, I updated you yesterday that we'd be joined by David Weisglass from DCP. And,
okay.
And just, Joel, if I could jump in and members of the service, if NYPD would like to join us to listen in on more, you're welcome to, but you're not obligated. So if you need to take off and we'll circle back to you in the near future. Thanks.
By the way, it's the issues that we have with trucks may not lead one to rap poetic, but there's legions of country trucking songs about trucks trying to avoid getting weighed. Just so you know, it's a well-worn territory in country
We'll
music.
expect a musical accompaniment next time.
Next time, yes. So, so we have here, I guess, David Weinglass. Thank you for coming from the City of Yes for Economic Opportunity. And there's a proposal that they're going to present, that David's going to present on distribution zones and their potential impact on last mile trucking. Perhaps most important this time of the year where all these Christmas presents getting delivered. So is David there?
Yes. Hi, how are you doing?
Yes, from the City of Yes. Okay, take it.
Great. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Good. And I am joined here by my colleague Charles from the Transportation Division. This is a relatively short presentation. I believe Hanif has described to you the details of the zoning for economic opportunity proposal, which has 18 kind of smaller proposals and then a couple buckets to try to make things a little bit easier to digest. And so we're going to dive in just to one of those proposals right now.
Okay.
And we can answer some questions about it. So a few short slides. So I'll go over these pretty quickly because this is just about everything kind of in large way. So City of Yes includes 3 text amendments. The first was zoning for carbon neutrality, which has already been approved by the City Planning Commission and by the City Council. That is all set and done. Zoning for economic opportunity is the one that we'll talk about tonight and the one that is ongoing. And then we'll have zoning for housing opportunity a couple months later in spring 2024. Then we'll go into public review at that time. For zoning for economic opportunity, where we are right now, is it's not a ULURP project technically because it's a text amendment, but it was referred out to community boards, I believe at the end of October, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, the beginning of October, I think. I need to go back and check. But what we do know is that every community board, every community organization, every person, regardless of what organization you're with or whether you're with an organization at all, has the right to issue their public comment, whether in writing or in person at the public hearing, which will be in early 2024, specific date forthcoming. And we do know for a fact, as Chair Garodnik has informed all community boards, that Any public comment submitted by anybody, community boards included, that is submitted before the end of January will be considered. We will have adequate time to consider all of that. And so if you want to make sure that your comments are heard, you'll probably be able to submit something in early February. But if you don't want to worry about the probably maybe missing any deadlines, just end of January is something that we know for an 100% fact. All of that will be considered. So want to just make that clear very quickly. All right. Moving on. So again, I'll go through this very quickly. Summary of proposals. We have 4 overall goals under which we have grouped some of these proposals. And today we're going to be talking about number 14, that is under goal 3 of enable more business-friendly streetscapes. 14 is about encouraging safe and sustainable deliveries with micro distribution. So again, this is very short. I'm just going to have a couple of slides. So this picture here, let's start with the photos. I always think that's more fun. So this here is something that I know you see a lot of in CB14. We see a lot of it all over Brooklyn, and it's something that is not helpful, right? It's not safe to pedestrians. It's not safe for circulation. It doesn't help what we're looking for. And so our proposal for micro distribution, we think, is going to have a big impact on reducing some of these situations, right? Micro distribution, what we'll see if we're going back to the text on the left side of the screen. So right now, the zoning actually doesn't allow for some of these non-traditional forms of goods delivery, actually to occur within commercial districts. Not every parcel or package or anything needs to be delivered with a massive UPS truck, right? Especially in 2023. People can walk to pick up their packages. There's bike couriers that don't take up as much space. And to the extent that any of those locations exist for bike couriers or for people to pick up their packages, right now they're actually just not permitted in commercial districts. And we don't think that that's very helpful because it ends up in situations like this where even small businesses that want to ship something small or simple or even have folks that in theory could pick them up maybe on a bike courier or something, they can't do it. And so they have to ship via some of these, larger parcels that there are larger services that have trucks like this, right? So basically, the issue I've talked about, there's a lot of delivery activity on streets and sidewalks. There's truck congestion. There's conflicts with pedestrians, cyclists. We already know about all of this. So what's our proposal? Well, we want to create a micro distribution facility, basically. The easiest way, I think, to describe what these will look like, and they're relatively new in a lot of cities, and they're continuing to evolve to become as efficient and as helpful as possible. The best way to describe these is basically a USPS store, but privately owned, right? If there's a post office or a local post office in a town or a neighborhood, that makes more sense, right? There could be there's the main post office for New York City somewhere, and then they distribute a lot of these parcels to smaller neighborhood postal facilities so that the distribution is a lot easier, right, and more efficient. And so we thought, well, why can't that happen in the private sector as well? Why can't small businesses take advantage of this? Another example that you could see is a UPS store, right? A UPS store is private and they are permitted to do this. Why are they permitted to do this? Well, because they have a bit of a loophole now where you can go into a UPS store and you can also print things usually, right? That puts you into a different category. And so it's a bit of a loophole where that's permitted. Now, if a business wanted to open up or a facility wanted to open up, a very small one in a commercial district that is purely there to hold packages basically, and allow for some of that small local scale delivery, they wouldn't be able to do that. They would have to, find some other loophole via printing or some other service or something like that. And so basically we want to create a pathway for folks to be able to have those packages. In C1 and C2 districts, right? And those are the commercial overlays in residential district overlays. in residential districts. So primarily residential districts, but there are overlays which allow commercial on the lower floors. As of now, there's a proposal to allow on the upper floors in some situations as part of this proposal, but that's not what we're talking about today. So in those overlay districts, which are primarily residential and have local serving businesses, right? You can think of these as your, local neighborhood corridors. There will be a limit of 2,500 square feet for these facilities, right? We think that that is sufficient to allow enough storage of some of these parcels without really ruining, the streetscape or having a severe impact on other businesses that may be located there. In C4 through C7 districts, which are those not overlays, right? These are not necessarily overlays over residential districts. These are primarily commercial districts and may have businesses that serve not only the local community, but maybe the larger citywide community or even regional community in certain situations. We've upped that square footage to 5,000. That'll be the maximum, right? If anybody wants to go larger than these in their district, larger than 2,500 in C1 or C2 overlay, or larger than 5,000, they would need to go through a BSA special permit situation or get a special permit from the City Planning Commission. Those are both discretionary, and there will be findings that are required, and the community board in both situations will have ample opportunity to weigh in on those if they're seeking to go over that square footage. In addition, there will be streetscape rules that will prohibit, papering over some of these windows. We've seen dark stores, as I'm sure many of you are familiar, and we want to make sure that our streetscapes are still habitable, still, nice places to explore and to walk around. And we don't want micro distribution facilities, which we think can help with a lot of the issues I brought up earlier, to actually have a negative impact on our streetscapes. And we thought that this is a good way for us to do that. Here's an overview of some of the C1 and C2 districts that you have in Community District 14, right? So they're all over the place. And you can see along Church Street, obviously, is a main, drag, as well as some areas of Coney Island Ave and Flatbush, your neighborhood better than I do. But those are the C1 and C2 districts, right? So these are the areas where folks will have the opportunity to open up some of these locations that are 2,500 square feet maximum, right? And again, the C1 and C2 districts, these are designed to have businesses that serve local communities. And so a lot of these businesses are a lot smaller, right? They may have a local fan base clientele that they can make some deliveries and have their business be a little bit more successful without having to put some of their smaller parcels or whatever that they're making or delivering onto some big UPS truck that has to go through narrow streets, right? The C4, C5, C6 districts, right? So I believe these are all C4 districts, if I'm not mistaken, that are shown here in blue, in light blue. So these are the areas in which 5,000 square feet would be the max size. Again, if you want to go anything bigger than that, you got to get a special permit, and that's a discretionary process through which the community will have ample opportunity to weigh what they think about going over that. But these are the specific areas in which 5,000 square feet would be permitted, right? And actually, that's really all I have. So it's a relatively straightforward proposal, but we're excited about it in that it can get rid of some of these situations. It can allow some of these larger trucks to operate, delivering larger parcels at to a larger community. And I think, we've seen the nature of transportation changing and the nature of small businesses changing as well. And we think that micro distribution facilities, it's kind of weird. When I first heard that term, I imagined a last mile facility, but this is actually, if anything, the opposite, right? This is just a small area that's allowed in certain commercial areas where you as an individual could maybe pick something up from a local store, where the store may not have the inventory or the capacity within their store itself to have a lot of the storage for people to pick things up. They'll leave it at this micro distribution facility. You go by your leisure, you pick it up. Great. Maybe, a bike courier can pick up a couple packages and go quickly without really messing up the circulation on the street or without leading to some of these terrible conflicts between pedestrians and cyclists and motorists, right? And so that's really the gist of our proposal. And we're excited about it. And at this point, Charles and I are happy to hear any questions you might have.
You're muted, Joel.
Sorry. Thank you for that presentation. Anything can help if to make the streets less congested. I see Carl has his hand up. Carl?
I do. Good evening, folks. Joel, thank you very much for recognizing me. And David and Charles, thanks for the presentation. So this is a two-part question. So the first part, I'm just trying to better understand the use case. And so, for example, there's a local neighborhood, store is the wrong term, but like there's a local neighborhood organization called I Am Caribbean, and they have a shop. They have a storefront on Nostrand. I think it's before Clarendon, right? And so if I understand this proposal correctly, is it that, I don't know their logistics, right? But is the idea that if I order something from I Am Caribbean today, it probably has to go through USPS or UPS or whomever, and then I get it shipped to where I'm in Brooklyn, as opposed to if this passes as written and it's implemented as written, then I Am Caribbean within its store would have an area for me to come and pick it up, or that they would work with an entity within one of those C1, C2s or C4s that you were showing for me to then go and pick it up? Like, that's my first question. Like, what would it look like in the future state?
Really the latter, right? This is not about something that's proposed within a store. I mean, if you have your store and you have an area for packages, you can do that already today, is my understanding. But real estate ain't cheap, so a lot of these stores don't have the ability to do that. So we'd allow folks basically to open up some of these very, very small, again, 2,500 square feet in the C1, C2 district facilities that are maybe on the streetscape. A lot of the local businesses may come and say, you know what, we don't want UPS coming in here all the time anyway. It's more expensive and difficult for us. Let's say we've got 1 million, deliveries or whatever. Let's put them all on Sunday night into this place, and then folks can pick them up as they see fit, or maybe hire, I don't know, a Postmates or some other kind of delivery service to kind of have some of those local deliveries, if I'm somewhat nearby.
Got you. Thank you for that clarity. And then the second thing too is when you were talking about the timeline, you said, you didn't say to be safer than sorry, but like to really increase the chances it's there would be end of January would be ideal. What is the mechanism through which people could provide their feedback?
We've got that.
Okay.
Covered. Yeah, we'll have our public hearing is scheduled for January 3rd.
So that'll be where we collect it and share it. Okay, gotcha.
Greg?
Cool. That's it from me.
Thanks, Carl. Greg, you have your hand up.
Thank you. And thank you, David, as well. So just still, a question I still have on this, because I think we're all trying to envision what these uses are supposed to look like. Is there any contemplation in terms of limitations of the type of vehicles that may be going in and out from these facilities? So for instance, what necessarily stops a user of these sorts of uses to still have trucks coming, in and out to perform the delivery functions of this particular location? I understand the advantages of, having people come in and maybe picking up their packages, or maybe having smaller vehicles available to do some of the deliveries. But is there any sort of real limitation here, though, in terms of, preventing people from still using trucks to, out of these uses? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, I've gone dark for a second. Okay. Yeah, no, we at DCP, all we have the ability to do is change the zoning. Even if we were to put regulations or try to put regulations on, anything, any kind of like different transportation modes that could utilize them, we don't have the ability to do so because that's in the public right of way, right? That's in DOT's area, MTA's area, depends whether it's sidewalk, street, whatever. We don't have those limitations. What we've done though is that we've kind of done enough research to find what's likely to be most feasible and where these will be used. It's very possible for this proposal, and quite frankly, for a lot of the CEO proposals, that they actually won't be taken advantage of very much. That's very possible, right? Some businesses may say, you know what, it's fine as things are going right now. What we think though is that for areas that have these micro distribution facilities that'll open, meaning there's actually demand for them from not only the consumer but also the producers of some of the parcels or the items that would be delivered, we don't think that we don't think it's necessarily feasible financially for folks to actually have that situation where they'll want to deliver something to a micro distribution facility, also pay for, a UPS truck or something like that. We don't have the ability to put regulation on it, and quite frankly, we don't want to. We don't find that the Department of City Planning is the best for regulating that kind of thing. It's certainly possible, right? That's legitimate. It's certainly possible and may occur in certain areas. But I think given what we've seen about the changing nature of delivery and the changing nature of retail, particularly after COVID, that it's most likely to actually occur that way. But the short answer to your question is there's no actual mechanism that we can put in to actually prohibit that. This is more about encouraging something or permitting something rather that could be helpful, and that we believe, given the research we've done, would be helpful. Charles, if you want to jump in at any point, feel free. But I think that's the gist of it.
Thank you. Glenn Wallen, you got your hand up.
Thank you. I'm listening to this proposal, and on one hand, it sounds like a really nice idea, try to minimize truck traffic. But when I think about this, the two things come to mind. First of all, why would anyone want to open one of these? You start a business to make a profit, and the only way to make a profit is to charge an additional amount of money for people to then go out of their way to have to go get their packages. Seems completely impractical. And even if somehow you could manage to make that happen, now all the truck traffic, the large trucks you're trying to eliminate, are going to one place, one area, as opposed to around everywhere. They're all coming to that one area, and that's going to really not be appreciated by the people who live and work in that specific area. This does not seem to me like a particularly workable idea. That's it. I'm done with my comments. Thank you.
I'm going to sound a little bit like Glenn. I don't, these days everybody loves getting their packages delivered to their doorstep, and they're used to that. And especially a business, if you're operating a business, you can be a one or two person in a store. Do you want to go off somewhere to get the package? Never, and also, aren't there businesses that already exist that do this, that you can have packages shipped to? I know there's, places where you can go and they'll package it for you and ship it for you. They have FedEx services, and you can, having a post office box, you can have things delivered there. I mean, I remember myself, I was traveling, I was in New Orleans, and I needed a lens for my camera, but I was staying somewhere like an Airbnb, and I didn't want to have anything delivered there. So I had it delivered to a store that accepted deliveries, and then when I picked it up there. I mean, I could see it working for people, and I've, probably most of us have experienced having packages taken from our places of residence, or know people that have. I could see people, and for that reason, I have everything delivered to my office. But I could see, if you're in that kind of situation, ship it. But I also question the idea of people going to a place when they enjoy getting the things right at their doorstep. So
I understood. I mean, I think there's multiple opportunities for, the delivery of some of these packages. I said that, you could pick one of these up as you're kind of doing your daily stroll, kind of like almost like a dry cleaner type of thing. But that's not necessarily all that it would have, right? Again, these kind of facilities exist in other places. We found them to be successful. We found that people actually do utilize them, and it's not always people picking them up, right? It's sometimes, again, we've seen a lot of the bike couriers that very quickly, go up. Maybe they've got, a tiny trailer on the back, or maybe they don't, they've got those things hanging on the back of their bike where people will still be able to get their packages delivered directly to their doorstep. It's really just a logistical issue on the side of the business. To the question of which businesses would use this, look, there's certainly some that have their existing situation and they'll say, nope, this is permitted, sure, whatever, we don't really care about it. And sure, that may happen, but we also don't see we don't see a reason necessarily where the Department of City Planning should put a restriction on situations where it may be helpful. Right. And so, Joel, you kind of brought up some of those situations. And, in some neighborhoods, they may be rare. In some neighborhoods, they may be less rare, those situations. But regardless, we see no reason to prohibit those things. Joel, you brought up something important, right? Of the opportunity where you have like kind of your own post box, your own PO box or something like that. That's basically what we're imagining here on a smaller scale. The only difference is that these wouldn't be government run. PO boxes are allowed to exist because they're government run, and so there's a special carve out in the zoning resolution to allow that, right? But we don't allow it for to be privately run, maybe, where the post office, the local neighborhood post office, doesn't really do all the jobs or that could be done. So maybe this, would be feasible in certain places. Maybe it wouldn't be feasible in other places. We've looked at a lot of situations in which it would be. Obviously, zoning for economic opportunity, we did a ton of outreach to the local businesses, and initial reaction has been, oh yeah, we actually might be able to, decrease some of our logistical costs for shipping,
Yep.
just by bringing it down the street. So
Okay.
you're very right. There may be certain situations where businesses say, I'm not really interested. And in those situations, it's unlikely that these micro distribution facilities would open up. This is not the government opening these places up. This would be, private actors in the private market deciding that there is actually demand for this micro distribution facilities to help small businesses and help consumers. If they don't see a demand for it, they won't open them up. But in situations where they think there is demand, they'll do so. And, part of determining that demand is reaching out to the local businesses themselves and trying to find a way for that to work.
All right. Sean, you got your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah. First of all, David, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us and standing in for Hanif. And I know
Happy to
you
do
know
so.
this district well from when you were our liaison directly. My question is, partly process, whenever the city proposes a new as of right use, and therefore limits the opportunity for hyperlocal input, and sort of diminishes the opportunity for an applicant to hear a hyperlocal perspective that might help inform their decision to open it or engage in a new as of right use. I wonder if there are other limits sewn in, such as Church Avenue, for instance. We were talking about truck routes, and Church Avenue is a truck route, which also has an express bus lane on it. And so since some of the street uses become zero sum, I wonder what limits are in place to, for instance is proximity to schools, and whether or not this would have some sort of conflict with, school buses and school children getting to and from school. So that's my question is, would as of right be everywhere where a C1 and C1, C2 exist as long as it's under 25,000? Or are there any prohibitions or sort of stopgaps sewn in?
Thank you. Well, first of all, it's 2,500 to be clear, not 25,000.
Sorry,
Want
I
to be
see
sure.
zero. I'm seeing double
I know.
zeros.
No, I do the same thing, but I don't want anyone to think that 25,000 square foot facilities are opening on their neighborhood districts. That's not what's happening for sure.
Fair. Thank you.
No, that's a legitimate concern. That's not what's built in right now to the proposal. It's certainly something that you can, put in your letter as a recommendation. Well, we'd be very open to hearing more about kind of any concerns you have about that. Again, I kind of go back to what I've said earlier, where On the contrary, we actually think, in a neighborhood where it's near a school, this would actually decrease some of those collision points, right? And some of those conflict points by kind of removing, we'll keep the UPS trucks and delivery trucks where they are, kind of doing some of those larger deliveries of sometimes larger packages to a larger geography. And they won't have to do some of these local, deliveries 10 blocks away or something like that. That could be handled by a courier on I don't know, either in a personal vehicle real quick, pick it up, leave, or actually probably more likely than a personal vehicle would actually be a bicyclist or somebody even on foot who delivers things, around the neighborhood, actually going into a facility, right, with their bike, right? There'd be room within these areas for their bicycle, or for their whatever they're carrying with them, to actually kind of organize things internally, totally separating themselves from the street and from the sidewalk situation. That's what we envision. That's what we think is most likely based on some of the research that we've done. But again, for this and all the other concerns, please, bring them to us and your recommendations, and follow up, and we'll make sure that they're considered, and we'll think about maybe if there's a way that we can better bake some of these ideas in.
Right, and that might actually be a good segue to the next part of the conversation. Joel, just giving you a time check, 7:42.
Okay, but only one more question here. Jeffrey's got his hand up.
Yeah, you touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious if you have been talking unofficially with people who might be making use of this, and are you looking at people picking up, customers picking stuff up directly themselves versus bike couriers versus small delivery vehicles? What are you sort of, from your conversations, or from where you've seen this work elsewhere, what are you envisioning?
I think what we see a lot of, and I mean, this has come up even before COVID, right? As we saw a lot of, Postmates delivery. I keep going back to Postmates. Can you tell that I get a lot of my stuff delivered? Postmates and things like that, of people kind of using their bikes or their mopeds or something like that. What we found in a lot of places is even when they have those deliveries. So to answer your question simply, I think that's what we envision a lot of this being. But we also don't see a reason to prohibit the ability of somebody to walk there if they live nearby. Even if, as a previous speaker said, most people like getting their packages directly to their door. I certainly do. But I also am not against, walking 2 blocks to get something if it's not going to be stolen. Point is, we think more likely it'll be the smaller deliverers, right? On a moped or on a bike or something like that. And in a facility like this, what we think is important is what we found is that a lot of these facilities, and we think that 2,500 or 5,000 square feet can accommodate this in addition to, some of the storage and lockers, whatever they have, actually have the opportunity to bring those bikes like into the store, or as close to the store as possible, instead of having these big scooters going up and down the sidewalk. You can either park your scooter right outside, like on the street, go in real quick, or if you had a bicycle or even a scooter, if it's a small one, you might actually be able to bring it into the store itself, totally eliminating the conflict that it might have on the street, allowing more pedestrian safety to be more free flowing, and also allowing circulation on the street itself to be a little bit more free flowing without, clogging it up with local deliveries, that could be more efficient elsewhere. So that's what we envision mostly, given some of our research.
Okay, so Sean, how do you want to handle the, thank you, by the way. Thank you, David, for that presentation, and your colleague Charles for being here. I think we all wish you well. If you accomplish less truck traffic, then we'll tip our hats to you. Sean, how did you want to go about the conversation though on last mile trucking?
We have been joined by Kevin Garcia, who I just made the presenter and who is here somewhere.
Yeah, I see Kevin Garcia, NYC-EJA. Is he muted?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Here, I see him. Yeah.
Great.
Joel, if you want Kevin to sort of just lead the conversation, and then people can chime in as they wish, that might be the way to go about it.
Sounds good to me.
Just want to say real quick, thank you for allowing us to present. We'll stick around, but just wanted to say thanks.
Thanks back at you, David.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for the opportunity to speak today. Huge shout out to Sean, who I spoke to about a week ago and was able to make this happen very quickly. My name is Kevin Garcia. I am the transportation planner with the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, which is a citywide membership network of community-based organizations working with the communities of color, low-income communities of color, in the fight for environmental justice. We, along with some of our member organizations and allies, launched a coalition called the Last Mile Coalition, looking to regulate these last mile warehouses that are popping up without, any public or environmental review in New York City. I have a very short presentation that I'm happy to go through, and you might see some of the same stuff that you just heard about from the Department of City Planning. But is it okay if I do the quick presentation?
Sure, if we feel to, we'll move you along, but yeah, go for it.
All right, no problem. Oh no, I have to adjust my settings. 1 second.
Do we need to make him a co-host? No.
Done did that.
I think I just have to update my setting very quickly. Okay, let me try one more time.
Do you see the little folder icon between stop video and there should be a red dot in a folder with an arrow in it?
Yeah, there's a share button, but then it asks me open system preferences. Unfortunately, I'm on a MacBook. I'm on my work computer. So yeah, Carl, I see you laughing at me. But let me go through this very quickly. So, and I'm happy to share the presentation with Sean and
Yeah, we'll post it. We'll post it on the on our website so people can go back to it for reference if that's more expeditious.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so basically, in the summer of 2021, we were made aware of 6 last mile warehouse facilities that were going to be constructed in Red Hook and in Sunset Park. I know this is Brooklyn Community Board 14, but it does impact, your community and as well, and a lot of other community districts, and I'll get to there. So these were, large facilities that, from our data gathering were 88,000 square feet or more, and most of them were over 100,000 square feet. What a lot of the community was telling us was that these warehouses were just sort of being constructed. They didn't know, when they were being proposed, how many trucks and vans were going to be needed to, make these deliveries to and from the facility, but that they were already feeling the impacts, through the increased vehicular traffic congestion, the increase in tailpipe emissions and air pollution. But they were also seeing the secondary negative impacts, delays on their buses, inability to have school buses, get to the schools as quickly. So what we did was we started doing some research, and what we found is that the Department of City Planning, treats these last mile warehouses as traditional warehouses. So they can be constructed as of right, without any public review process, without any environmental review process, and they can be constructed as of right in manufacturing zone areas and commercial 8 districts. So none of the C1 through C7 that we saw earlier. And what we were noticing is that a lot of these same zones are adjacent to environmental justice communities, which historically have been disproportionately overburdened with heavy polluting infrastructure. And the reason this is happening, as you all know, we were in a global pandemic. But before that, there was an increase in e-commerce, but with the global pandemic, we were being asked to stay home, socially distanced. So people were ordering more goods online, everyday things like Pampers, stationery items, you name it, right? Food. So what we were seeing was this increase in truck traffic, increase in tailpipe emissions, increase in noise pollution, increase in air pollution, additional pedestrian safety concerns because of a lot of the trucks and vans, especially the 53-foot ones, but then the clustering of these facilities because they're only permitted as of right in certain zones, the manufacturing and CA districts. While the coalition has submitted a zoning text amendment application to regulate the siting and operation of these warehouses by defining what they are and creating a special permit process for these warehouses, what we've seen is that there is an opportunity in the city of Yes for economic opportunity to include this. So as you heard earlier, there's the proposal for the micro distribution facilities, but we feel that that only tackles a small portion of it. It doesn't look at the entire logistics delivery system holistically, and it doesn't tackle the larger facilities, which are tend to be 50,000 square feet or more. So what we think is that the city should be adding a proposal to define what last mile warehouses are, using the actual use, which is the increased velocity of goods to and from the facility, but then also create the special permit process where we can address the siting of these facilities and address the clustering of these facilities by including setbacks of 1,000 feet where no last mile warehouse is permitted 1,000 feet within 1,000 feet of a park, nursing home, a school, but also 1,000 feet from public housing, 1,000 feet from other last mile warehouses. But then, needing in order to have the special permit granted, there would need to be reporting and recommendations and findings from the Department of Transportation, where there would be no undue increases in traffic congestion, and also the Department of Environmental Protection, where there would be no undue increases in emissions. But then also, if those recommendations and reportings, include pushing these warehouses to use alternative modes of transportation, such as maritime transportation if they're along the waterfront, but also activating rail or making deliveries by bikes or electric vans, the permit would be granted if the warehouse operator abides by that. So I'll stop there, and happy to talk more about our proposal and how it definitely fits into the city of Yes. And our big ask is we would love to see this community board include that in their final recommendations to the Department of City Planning that you all submit by the end of January. Just to be transparent, the coalition will also be submitting comments as well. So yeah. And thank you again.
I would just like to say one thing before opening the floor. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, it would be helpful if you would outline the specific things you would want us to include in our recommendation, and we can pick and choose,
I think a lot of that will be in the presentation that we'll post, and I think we also have a template from CB7, and then this can be, this is a sort of a hyper focus on just one of the many proposals in COIEO. So it's just, yeah, it can be reviewed again when we have the public hearing on January 3rd.
Sounds good. Elizabeth, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi. I had a question about the setbacks. When you're saying setbacks of 1,000 feet from parks and schools and other things, do you mean like distance from a site where okay, so not like a setback within a site, requiring 1,000 feet, because that would, sorry for kind of a wonky zoning question. Yeah, and I'm just a follow-up question I had to that is there a map of where those potential locations could, like what position locations those exclude? Just because like off the top of my head, I see a lot of schools in a lot of places, and definitely like I share the concerns you're bringing up, and I would like to limit the sites where small children are, where there's supposed to be good clean air for parks and so forth. Like I totally am on board with the idea of it, but I just would want to know if that's like the appropriate distance, or if that kind of, I'm worried if that maybe disproportionately keeps them out of some neighborhoods, but not other neighborhoods, depending on like where these places are distributed. Thinking a little bit to our neighborhood as, or this area, other than Prospect Park, our district doesn't have a lot of other park space. So, I know we have schools and other things, but just, I can't, just thinking off the top of my head, it's not necessarily perfectly distributed across the city. So I just would want to make sure that there aren't some like unexpected consequences of, accidentally creating another EJ location, because actually the only places within 1 or 2 neighborhoods that would allow it, this sort of facility to be. But super appreciate all the thought you put into this and the ideas there. Just would love to see a visual if that's possible. I know you can't just make it immediately.
Yeah. So first, Joel and Sean, happy to send over some talking points or some things that we would love to have the community board include in their comments. Elizabeth, to answer your first question, yes. What I mean setbacks, I mean the distance in between those sensitive receptors and the last mile warehouses, but also between the last mile warehouses. We chose 1,000 feet because that's about the width of a Manhattan block. So like between avenues. So we felt that was a appropriate size. But the thing that we want to make sure is that we understand the importance of these logistics facilities, right? We understand that look, we're all complicit in this, unless any of you don't use Amazon or IKEA, Best Buy, or any of those. We understand the importance of them. There's still a lot of people who for one reason or another are socially distancing, or unable to go shopping in person. So we're not. This isn't a moratorium. This isn't a ban on the industry. But what we do know is that and this, in the presentation slides, you'll see a map of where the manufacturing sites are and where the identified last mile warehouses are. So you'll see that in your district, community board 14, there's maybe one lot that's manufacturing, and I think that might be a transportation site, but I don't remember if there's any commercial 8 lots, but your district wouldn't have any last mile warehouses. Instead, what you all are dealing with are the secondary negative impacts, which is the increase in truck traffic, vehicular traffic, and potential air pollution, right? That you all have been mentioning, right? So I don't suspect. So right now, what we are seeing is that disproportionate siting and clustering of those facilities. What the zoning text amendment would do is work to minimize that, right? Because they can only be constructed in certain neighborhoods which have manufacturing. So like Sunset Park, Williamsburg, Hunts Point in the Bronx, Maspeth, but really all along the Newtown Creek area. So Maspeth is probably the hottest hotspot, and then areas around JFK. And I wish I could show you the map because you could then see some of the warehouses that we have identified. And the reason I say identified is because, as I mentioned earlier, these warehouses are treated as traditional warehouses, even though we know that they're demanding a lot more truck traffic, right? Because they have to meet next day, same day delivery. They're operating 24/7, 365 days a year. So there's no public database on where these warehouses are, right? So if you look into the warehouses, in the NYC open data, there's no identification or variable showing where they are. So we've been doing a lot of the data gathering, going through news articles to find where these are. So we haven't found all of them. Yeah, but
I also just asking what the map would look like with your proposal from the zoning thing, because right now I could look up and see where these manufacturing and C8 districts are. I wanted to understand better, once you eliminate those 1,000 feet from sensitive receptor sites, what would be remaining, and if it would be well distributed, or if it would be just overly placing a burden in a kind of a similar, a different way. I know that wouldn't be the intention, but I just it would be helpful to see it mapped out. I know that the locations of the existing sites are hard to find, but just what the new zoning that you're proposing would look like would be helpful.
So we have mapped the ones that we have found, and we've mapped the sensitive receptors. So the schools, the parks, the public housing, NYCHA, and the nursing homes. What we found is that there is still space available for these last mile warehouses to be constructed. With the zoning text amendment, the special permit. But we don't like we still know that there will be last mile warehouses that are being concentrated in certain areas in certain neighborhoods. So like, you know, Sunset Park, for example, Hunts Point in the Bronx, they will still be the ones who see a lot of these last mile warehouses popping up. Yeah. Oh, Joel, I think you are on mute.
Joel, you're muted.
Muted, unmuted.
Yeah, Joel, you're muted. Yeah,
I'm
yeah, you
muted.
are.
I'm muted. My wife would probably like that more often than not, but anyway, thank you for your presentation. And yeah, this package thing is just you know, a part of our time, and it's a work in progress. You know, everybody loves their deliveries, you know, and how to manage it is a challenge. So I don't see any other hands. Again, thank you very much for that presentation and for the work you do for economic, for justice. It is an important thing. You know, I think whenever I think of it, I think of all those highways, you know, that destroyed neighborhoods. You know, that's perhaps the most dramatic example. And I go to New Orleans a lot, and they did the same thing in New Orleans, like the Cross Bronx Expressway. There's a highway that just divided a neighborhood, and people talk about it to this day. Anyway, so I think we're done for the evening. So anybody make a motion to adjourn? Somebody.
I don't think you have to be that formal. If you would like to conclude
I'm closing
with a thanks.
I can motion if you need.
All right. All right.
Second.
Sounds good. Thank you,
Thanks
everybody.
for stepping in so quickly, Kevin. It gave us, you know, it's food for thought, and we'll get those documents up just to be able to sort of flesh it out better.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Be well.
Thank
Happy
you.
holiday. Happy holiday. Geez. All right.
Happy holidays. Happy New
Happy
Year.
holidays.
Yeah.
Everyone, have a good night.
Everyone be
Thank you,
well.
Joel and Musa, for concluding our calendar year of committee meetings. We'll see you all next year.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, John. Bye.
Bye, folks.